Kevin Weeks is reporting that Jacob Trouba will be named the next New York Rangers captain. And I personally, considering all the current options and where they are in their careers, and I was perfectly fine with sticking with the A's, sticking with the alternate captains. I had no problem with that. And I thought too much a deal was made about the fact that the Rangers didn't have a captain. And I was fine continuing with that. So now Trouba, as Kevin Weeks is reporting, he will be named Rangers captain in the next 24 hours as the time I'm recording this. And Kevin Weeks, very reliable source. I believe that this will occur. And I'm not one of those people that, like Chris Kreider has to be captain, Mika Zibanejad has to be captain. I don't love Trouba being captain. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think it's a major problem. I don't really think it's gonna, have a negative effect necessarily. Could it made on Trouba? Possibly. That is in play. That maybe there is a lot of pressure on Trouba to be the captain of the team. It does sound like he is the vocal leader from what you hear. It definitely, Zibanejad is definitely very quiet. And Kreider, I think is a vocal leader. But there's a reason why Chris Kreider hadn't been named captain sooner. You know what I mean? Like, Chris Kreider's been with the Rangers for a very long time. There was opportunities in the last few years to name captain. It didn't happen. So, and I think Kreider, honestly, is really the type of person that if you name captain, there could be a negative effect on him. We saw with Ryan McDonagh how his play slipped a little bit when he, got the C. And so with Kreider, Kreider is a bit of a mental player. So I didn't think that Kreider should be named captain, but I was more, if we're talking this roster, for me, I probably would have maybe waited to see if like an Alexis Lafreniere matures and maybe in a few years could become the captain. Now, I was okay with that. People talk about Adam Fox. That's an interesting one. I don't really see him as captain material. Certainly not at this point in his career. Look, like I said, Jacob Trouba probably is one of the big-time leaders in that locker room. Apparently, I think it was a quote from Ryan Strome, who had said that Trouba kind of rounded the troops together after Game 4 of the Penguins series in the first round, where the Rangers, got shellacked and things weren't looking good. I think Trouba was the one that kind of was really sort of rallying the team. So for all that, I get it, right? If it's based on that, I do. But Jacob Trouba, look, not for nothing. I don't know how long he will last on this Ranger team. Now, I think that you would expect to see Jacob Trouba on this team for at least a couple more seasons, but his contract being what it is, and the Rangers eventually, being in a tight cap situation. But I guess that doesn't matter to them. When you think about it, it hasn't in the past. Chris Drury was named captain when he was an older player that you kind of knew that wasn't going to last long. But this is different. Ryan McDonagh was named captain, and he, what was it? I guess it must have been 3.5 seasons then he was dealt. So I suppose that Trouba being named captain doesn't necessarily change the timeline with which he's on the team, but this is a pretty big step up. I mean, Jacob Trouba, he wore an A. I think he's considered one of the bigger names on the team, kind of, right? I mean, if we're thinking about popularity, and this should not be a popularity contest, right? But if we're just going to go based on that, and let's take Igor out of the equation, goalies just, they're not going to be a captain. It's just the way it is. Even though, like, in some ways, Henrik Lundqvist kind of was the captain, technically, obviously, he wasn't. And so, with that being said, like I said, Kreider, more popular player. Zibanejad, Panarin. I would say Adam Fox is more popular. Obviously, he won the Norris Trophy a couple of years ago. And I can go on and on. Really, some of the kids are just, in some ways, resonate more with the fan base. Jacob Trouba is an interesting sort of in-between, where Jacob Trouba has one of the biggest contracts on the team and is a very integral part of this club. But, again, for me, it's interesting. He's not homegrown. He was on the Winnipeg Jets for a very long time, very, very long time. And he just finished his third season with the Rangers. Year one, really years 1 and 2 were not very good in my estimation. Year one, I think there were moments where it looked like, all right, like he could be good, but I felt like as that year one season went along, it just wasn't great. I think this past season was a big step up for Trouba. Big step up. Although, again, in the postseason, I can't not help but think about Game 3 against the Lightning. That game was single-handedly on him, and that's the one where everything changed. And Jacob Trouba was the one who fucked up in that game. Took 3 penalties, right? I believe it was 3. I try to erase it from my mind, but I don't really agree with this. It definitely also, in some ways, probably proves true about the report that Trouba was to be named captain going into this past season, and then that was, sort of turned aside. I get the sense that Gerard Gallant wanted a captain to be named, and I think it was probably more of the front office that said, no, we're not ready for that. I think Gerard Gallant wants a captain on this team. And so hearing that Jacob Trouba is being named captain, it's not a surprise, especially because of the reports, like I said, that I believe it was Arthur Staple that had said that, Jacob Trouba was pretty close to being named captain last season. And so, this isn't like the worst choice of all time by any means. I think in terms of fan service, I think Kreider being named captain would have made a lot of people happy. I honestly probably would have come on here and basically said the same thing. If you asked me who I'd rather be captain between the two, I guess Kreider, although like I said, I think there'd be adverse effects where I think that Chris Kreider could have been affected. Trouba probably not as much. But like I said, there is still a chance that it could, weigh too much on him. But he does seem like the type that kind of just, it stays pretty even keel, more so than most. Like, he doesn't really, like, from a mental fact, like, he is, I'll give him that, Jacob Trouba. He is who he is. A fairly consistent player when you think about it. But Jacob Trouba, this is a pretty big deal in terms of, like, the fan base and kind of what it looks like from the outside. To me, like, it's not going to really affect so much, but I know there's a lot of fans. People were, even were commenting on some recent, videos like, hey, like, we need to name a captain. And my opinion was I disagree with that, but I know that this will make a lot of fans happy that there will be a Ranger that wears the C. And so, again, I don't really agree with the Jacob Trouba choice. I'm not going to be up in arms about it. I don't think it's like that big a deal one way or another. For me, I would have stuck with the process and I thought the A's honestly worked fine. But most teams have a captain, and I guess there's a reason for that. But Jacob Trouba, an unlikely, certainly when he was acquired going into the 1920 season, if you had told me that Jacob Trouba would eventually be the captain of the New York Rangers, that would have been surprising to me. I definitely would not have expected that, but I will say this. A stand-up guy really seems to have a big effect in that locker room, and that's the most important thing. It's not about the fans. It really is about in that room. And I assume that everyone was on board with this. And when I say that, I mean really Kreider and Zibanejad. They're the elder statesmen of the club. I'm sure that they had the full support. And not that they're the ones who made the decision, but I can see people like, oh, like, Kreider got snubbed. I don't see it that way. I think he probably really agreed with this decision. And so Jacob Trouba is going to be the next captain of the New York Rangers.